Welcome to the Margin Business Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. In today's episode, we got Katherine Bakotic. Katherine is the Director of Brand Marketing of Branded, an aggregator who is buying Amazon businesses. And Katherine will tell us a lot more about Branded and about her experience. Welcome, Katherine. Thank you so much, Katherine, for joining us today. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, let's begin a little bit about yourself. You know, it's all about yourself, and obviously afterwards about Join Branded as well.
Yeah, so I guess a complicated question. So my background is in management consulting and mostly focused on retail and fashion retail. So I'm American, but I'm based in Paris. So you can probably tell from my accent that I'm not French. So formerly in the US, when I was in consulting through business school, I was really focused on big brands. I did internships at Burberry, at Opening Ceremony, and then I was at Kate Spade before moving to Paris. And after that, I worked at Nike. And so I think that was a really great marketing experience for me, and obviously really learning how, one of the best marketing companies in the world runs in terms of thinking about the consumer and being very, very consumer focused, which I think is the number one most important thing when you work in marketing. And so after that, I joined Branded here in Paris. And so that's where I am today.
Okay. So when we go a little bit back, which city in the US?
Yeah, I was in New York.
New York, yeah. I guess by the accent as well, so, but, I'm not that good. I'm not good. We're a localization company, but, there is some limits as well to what we can find out, but I thought so. So when we talk about management and all of this, your career began like 2010, 2012, somewhere over there?
Yeah, around 2010.
Okay. So then you work yourself through, and then you have seen the opportunity. When was the first time that you actually got into e-commerce? Because somewhere on the line you cross path into e-commerce as well. I guess if you when you work with Join Branded, some kind of background would be good if you join such a company.
Yeah, in terms of e-commerce, I would say it really started. I'm sure there were actually projects in which we were working with brands that were doing e-commerce back in 2010. It was definitely a newer space, right? Like it wasn't as as big of a thing.
Sure.
People weren't as focused on it. I think Amazon still only sold books then, like things like that, right?
Yes.
But I would say like the first big entry into e-commerce was actually when I was at Kate Spade after business school. And as well as when I was doing internships, we were really focused on, for example, for Opening Ceremony, I did an MBA project on their international e-commerce expansion and how they could think about expanding from currently in the US to like, how do they think about shipping? Do they use a third-party provider? Again, at that point, like it wasn't as clear how you calculated tax and duties and customs, and like, should they use a third party and how do they go about doing that? And so I think that that was really like the first entry into learning about e-commerce and thinking through the strategy there. And then at Kate Spade, which was actually already fairly developed on the e-commerce front once I was there. I don't know if you know, around that time period in 2014, it was very big on flash sales.
Okay,
like
not really.
So Guild Group and Groupon and all of these
yes, Groupon. Yes, Groupon rings a bell.
Yeah, timed sales. That was like really the big thing back then, when like you would launch a sale and it would only be for 24 hours. And so Kate Spade was actually fairly advanced on that front in terms of having their own flash sales and running their e-commerce business and having a pretty big presence on e-commerce, especially for a fashion brand, because at the time it wasn't quite as popular to be so developed on the e-commerce side.
Yeah. Okay, that's already a very, very deep background in e-commerce, I would say, So, but this time you still were not in Paris, right? You still were in New York?
No, I was still in New York. Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about this jump. How, because, there's many people who will be interested in jumping into, some international environment. How do you go from, New York, Paris, quite far, few hours of flight, another continent. How does it
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how many people are going to follow the steps that I took since it was actually my husband who got a
Okay,
job in Paris. And so we just decided to make the leap. I studied French in high school
great.
and college. So for us, it was a pretty easy decision to kind of like, quit my job, take a leap, and move to Paris. And so he obviously had a job because we transferred for his job, but I wasn't working for the first couple of months, exploring the city, getting to know a new environment, and that was super fun.
Yes, sure. I can
Obviously
imagine,
landed
you
on my
know.
feet.
There is plenty nice things to do, you know. I think you cannot stop to I mean, it's a fact there is some historical things to see which, you know, you cannot see anywhere in the world. So I guess you must have a brilliant time. So and then you directly joined Branded, right?
No, actually, I worked at a startup at Envy Gallery, which is a
Okay.
furniture e-commerce brand, for a
E-commerce,
couple of
easy.
months. Yeah,
Yeah,
more e-commerce.
great.
And so I was helping them actually kind of in your line of business, like think through how to localize their site and translate it. At the time, it was only available in French.
Okay.
And when I worked with them, actually, we expanded to open the German language site so that we could deliver furniture to Germany and Austria,
Wow.
as well as the English language site for the rest of Europe. And so opening up the UK, opening up the Netherlands, all in English, not in local language, but then also being able to open up Italy as well. So I was really working with them on their kind of marketing strategy as well as translation and localization, just to make sure that their overall positioning and marketing and branding was a good fit for outside of the French market as well.
Okay, very good. Because yeah, the French market, they definitely need that. They need this international touch in order to reach international customers as well. I mean, obviously the brands that are known, they need it as well. But you know, smaller brands which have a big potential, they definitely need such an exposure. So we begin on, for example, 2020. Let's say 2020, when 2021, when aggregators were beginning to really making some noise in the market. I don't say it's the first time they ever come to the market, because we go way back then. But as they're beginning to make noise, how did you get attracted? I mean, by an aggregator. I mean, you need to be in the space, first of all. You need to understand e-commerce a little bit in order to understand, not to understand what's an aggregator, but more to understand what such a company is actually doing with Amazon accounts. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit more about that.
So actually in 2020, I was still at Nike. So that was kind of my middle portion between Envy Gallery in Paris and then also being at Branded. And I think the big pull wasn't aggregators, especially, or Amazon specifically. I would say that at Nike, and you can read in their public materials as well, like they're super, super laser focused on digital
Yes.
transformation, and obviously extremely advanced in their own e-commerce capabilities, outside of Amazon, of course, but obviously owning the customer journey, owning the direct relationship, making the pivot from wholesale to direct sales, and especially towards mobile apps and like their Nike app specifically versus apps like sneakers or other things. And so I think at Nike, that was like the really strong focus was um elevating the digital transformation, and that touched on every single person's role and job at Nike. And so generally I would say that kind of pushed me towards, again, continuing to focus on digital transformation. And so when I was looking for kind of like the next opportunity, that's when the aggregator space started to look really interesting, because it was like this new digital frontier. Learning about Amazon was something completely different. And also I wanted to be in a more operational role. So obviously within marketing and not necessarily on the Amazon operations side, but just being at a smaller company, at a startup that was more entrepreneurial, just really spoke to me. And I felt that I could continue to learn about the digital and the e-commerce space in a way that I couldn't at a large company.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because when I look at your background and when I look at Join Branded, it definitely matches. Because I mean, Join Branded is one of the largest aggregators, but not only one of the largest aggregators, is one who has the best positioning for me. I mean, when you look at it at a logical from a logical point, it's not the fastest growing, but for me, it has the most potential because they're already on the international markets. I mean, focused on the international markets, while others are very focused only on the US. And the US obviously will have and meet his limits, their limits at some points, if they not have already met their limits right now when we look at the numbers. That's why I was really looking at Join Branded, and I think there is a lot what they want to do and a lot what will be done in terms of looking at the international markets such as Japan, where not many people actually putting their feet, or all the European markets, which is as well not very common for American companies to actually touch this, because they think obviously afterwards you need to build new departments within the company, make everything bigger. But there is easier options for that. You can hire agencies. You can do lots of things in order to grow and in order to make things happen a little bit faster and more professional, maybe as well more cost wise. So I think at that point it's a perfect match. Just can you tell me a little bit more as well about how you see the future of the aggregators right now? I mean, in general, and how do you see if you can talk about it, obviously, and how the plan of Branded is to go further as well in the direction of growth, obviously.
Yeah. Well, thanks. First of all, it's a nice compliment about our positioning. I do cover our corporate marketing, so that's on my team as well. And I think for us, just to comment on international expansion, that's one thing that's always been super important to us from the beginning, and is part of the reason why we do emphasize that we are based in both Paris and New York from the start, right? So we have a team that does international expansion, but it's like a home market for them. And so in general, I think that is a bit different than companies that are only based in the US, because then when you have to expand, it's like you do actually have to like acquire a team or figure out an agency or something like that, versus like we have in-house knowledge because we've started with people based in Europe who do know some of the international markets as well as like the home market of the US. So I think that's a really strong point on our side, which is cool for you to point out. In terms of the aggregator industry, I think that, I mean, everyone's talking about it, right? Consolidation is the big word, because there are just certain people who are doing well and certain people who aren't. And I think that eventually we'll see how that comes together. I think, we're almost at the end of the year. I would expect that there's going to be continued news even through next year on consolidation, because I think that people were a bit more optimistic that potentially the recession or other economic pressures would start to ease, and then that would help fundraising. And so other aggregators that potentially wouldn't have considered a combination or an acquisition because they thought that they could go, continue on their own, if they're struggling to raise capital over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, they might have to reconsider their plan in terms of consolidation and kind of joining forces. And so I think that's what we're really seeing right now, is that there's different levels of optimism amongst the different aggregators, as well as different levels of performance. So obviously, if you're performing really well, you can afford to be a bit more optimistic about your solo journey as an aggregator, versus if you're not performing well, if you're not profitable, and you don't have a lot of capital anymore. So then, what are your next steps? And so I think that's the trend that we're continuing to see.
Okay. That's I think that's really, really good to see how you see the future, or how it will be most probably. And there's as well a point when we say next steps. What is Join Branded? What are the next steps, for example, from Join Branded? Where are they? I mean, obviously a large company like Join Branded, they have a plan for the next years. If you can talk about it as well, how would it look? What direction will you take in order to stay in the market, and in order as well to be innovative and to grow, obviously?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I don't think that we've really changed what we had set out to do other than become more focused. So originally what we really wanted to do at Branded was to find what we call challenger brands, which are brands in like consumer goods categories that are really challenging the incumbent. So like if you think about like razors, for example, people challenging the Gillette and the Schick of the world. That's what we would consider a challenger brand. And that's what we were looking for, that kind of special spark of a brand that we really felt was in a category where it could really be a big contender and grow into $100 million brand. So that hasn't changed. I think we're just more aware that there's less of them out there than we might have originally thought. And it's much harder to grow a challenger brand from $1 million rather than a challenger
Definitely.
brand from $10 million. So I think that what we've really like kind of shifted on is our acquisition criteria, for example, has gotten a lot more in terms of a minimum revenue size, because we are really looking for brands that have established themselves, not just on Amazon, but have actually built a brand following, a customer following,
Very
and
important.
things that we know that are really, really important to brand building. So it doesn't change, because we've always talked about brand building and like finding true brands, and we're not acquiring like the Ethernet cables of Amazon. But I think just like our focus has shifted, and we've realized that like our portfolio also needs to be balanced to focus on these brands that we think can actually make it to that $100 million
Okay.
status. I mean, I also, the other thing I wanted to mention, which I
Yes.
forgot to mention at the end of that conversation, is like, because you mentioned innovation.
Mhm.
And so for us, that again is a really big focus area for us, our NPD, our new product development group, and launching new products. I mean, I think this is again something people have criticized aggregators for, is like not focusing enough on launch. And I would say that that's the opposite here. We're really focused on launch. We're really focused on new product. We have a really strong new product development team. And we
Okay.
see that as like the main lever for growth for our existing brands, right? It's not enough to just coast on the success of like the hero SKUs that you inherited. Of course, like you want them to continue to do well, but for us, that's a big part of the strategy as well, like building these challenger brands, but also making sure we're supporting them with the right innovation.
And I think this was as well directly related to my question. You must read my mind.
Yeah.
So you spoke already about it. So the difference between branded and other aggregators, obviously there's a difference, because some aggregators, they hold the customer by the hand through the whole process. Others are less personal. They just throw money, acquire, not right now anymore, but we talk about like last year or something. Right now everyone is a little bit on a kind of a budget, but understand. So the multiplies are not anymore the same as before so you
Right.
cannot anymore sell for the same price as a year ago. So what is your process, or how is it how is the company different from others, for example,
Yeah.
in which ways?
I think others have kind of gone the direction that we started out in which we actually do strongly like recommend within our own business to continue to partner with the founders who have started their brands. And so that's always been an option for us, whereas a lot of aggregators really weren't interested in that from the very beginning. They were like, here's your money and thanks, like have fun on the beach. And like that was their ethos, right? In acquiring a business. And for us, we actually were always really on board with keeping the founders if they wanted to stay. Obviously, not everybody wants to
I
stay,
like
so
that.
totally
Yeah,
understand that.
sure.
But for example, like I think our stat is actually like 3 out of the 4 founders that we've acquired, they stay with us in some sort of long-term capacity to continue growing their business with Branded. For example, one of our brands, Ototo, we actually kept their entire team to continue to work with us on product design and new product development, because that's what they were really passionate about. That's differentiating about the brand. If you look at it online or, check it out on TikTok, Ototo is really, really known for its product design. And like, it's something that we really knew that it's not like any new product development team is going to be able to pick that up and like continue to grow that brand, right? There's something special about the team that built it, that understands the brand and they understand the brand growth. They just needed the help to not work on all of the other things that are related to running a business, right? Like, and that's where we could really step in. We could complement their expertise with ours and allow them to have the time to focus on new product development, product design, photography, like the creative aspect of things. And now they don't have to think about, running the Amazon account or like responding to seller inquiries or, whatever else it is that they used to have to deal with in their business. We can alleviate all of that. And that's been the main benefit of a company like that joining our company, and continuing to work on the brand that they've built over, I think it was a period of 13 or 19 years, right? Like they've been working on it for a long time.
I think this is as well a very, very good point, because having this connection to the brand and not losing it. Because when you acquire a brand, as you know, it's like you take something over, and if you don't take it over correctly, imagine you have 8,000 SKUs on one side. You need to do the shipping, you need to do the buying, you need to the whole soul of the company. If you take the ones who are working on it directly out, it cannot work. I mean, it might work, but there will be significant losses until you figure out how to do it. And maybe some companies don't even have the strength in order to bear these losses. And there we have already some problems. So I really like the approach where you really say, like, because you need time to understand the company, to understand the whole process in it. You cannot understand it directly. That's why as well, I think 12 months or 24 months or even more, they stay completely with you. So they are really there because they are the soul of this product, like especially what you say, like some innovative product, like or original products, like which you don't find anywhere. These products, they need the owners in there, or the founders, the one who are working on the whole design and everything, in order to thrive further on and have this special thing. How they got famous, actually, they still keep it and they move on. So it's a perfect approach, a perfect explanation as well. I have one more question, because we talk about founders and CEOs and owners. What is your message to anyone out there who has a brand, or who moving on, maybe who wants to sell, or wants to keep going on their own? Maybe some are struggling, some are really good, but in general, what would be your question?
My advice,
your message.
Yeah, I'm in marketing, so I'll give like the one piece of advice, which is always focus on the customer. I think there are a lot of Amazon sellers that are really focused on, conquering a niche, or like finding this like loophole or like a little opportunity here, which is really great. But once you find it, then you really need to think about it from a customer perspective, because I'm sure there's many people who've listened to this before where they found a niche, they did a great product, they thought it was going to be really differentiating, and then like no one bought it, right? Because like you didn't think about like whether someone really needed it or not, and like whether it was a space that had enough people that really needed it in order to launch a successful product. And so I think that sometimes people get really caught up in data points and like using a tool and like finding a specific opportunity, and they forget to consider any sort of like customer insight or like a customer experience around it. And that, I would say, is my biggest piece of advice.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I will put this in a quote as well. One last thing, because there is plenty listening to the podcast, and I'm sure they will be interested. Some they will be interested in order to know more about how to sell the company, or how the process is and how they can do that. How is the best way to contact you? And
everyone can reach out on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive there. Also, you can go to our website, joinbranded.com, and
we'll put it
fill out
here
a evaluation form or reach out to us. And so, I'm sure it'll be in the link in the video. But really, like, reach out on LinkedIn, send a message, and get in touch.
That's great. Really. Thank you so much for your time today, Katherine. This was an amazing advice, presenting Branded and everything around it. It's really was a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, it was really, really great to speak with you today as well. Thank you so much for having me. And hope we can continue the conversation.
Definitely. Thank you.